That was really an amazing portrayal of what has happened in this community in just the 17 short years since we were here. It's unrecognizable. What a difference 17 years makes. What a difference a year has made. Think back with me for a moment to San Francisco last year. What our expectations were going to be going into a new Congress, a new administration. Things are a little different. I didn't expect to see the United States at this point withdrawing from the Paris Accords, the brutal administrative budgets we've seen advanced, upheavals in health, immigration, another potential debt ceiling crisis. And what about that $1 trillion in infrastructure that was on the horizon? I didn't quite foresee the difference of doing business in the world that I operate on a daily basis. There is a big campaign underway by the administration to convince people to vote for a tax bill that is one page and some ink stains. Nobody's seen what this bill is. Or that the only way the United States Senate could muster the required 51 votes to vote on a health plan was to make sure nobody knew what was in the health plan. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. But one thing that hasn't changed is the commitment of people at the state and local level to get on with business. Before the election, you were planning on a variety of initiatives without waiting for the federal government. What, $200 billion approved at the state and local level? Not just in LA and San Francisco and Seattle. 55 out of 77 initiatives passed. We've seen over half the states raise their transportation revenues, including some very red Republican states. The administration may want to withdraw from the Paris Accords, but we're looking at a renewed commitment to a low-carbon future. California is helping lead the way, but states in the West, hundreds of cities, counties, campuses, churches, businesses, all moving forward. One thing no administration can do is repeal economics, science, and technology. And that progress that we're seeing is going to continue. Now, I have about a half dozen points that I would like to make briefly, because I do think that this is a slightly different environment, but many of the principles remain the same. First and foremost, just because we appear and perhaps are dysfunctional at the federal level, don't give up on the federal partnership. Infrastructure has been involved with partnerships with state, local, and the private sector throughout the American history. The public-private partnership that was referred to a moment ago with the Transcontinental Railroad. This is part of what we have done. And you ought to insist on holding the federal government accountable for its historic role with infrastructure dating back to Benjamin Franklin and the postal roads. And it can be a reality. We are watching it slowly dawn on people, even in Congress, that we can no longer pay for 2017 era infrastructure with $1993. Your visits to Capitol Hill, working with the media, building the coalitions, are in fact making a difference. There is the broadest coalition assembled for the bill that I have to raise the gas tax for the first time in 24 years. That is the broadest coalition of any major issue before Capitol Hill. Labor, business, contractors, AAA, truckers, bicyclists. I mean, they're all in alignment, and the point is being made. Actually, recently at one of the stakeholder meetings we periodically have convene on a bipartisan basis, the chair of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, Bill Schuster, acknowledged that he favored that infrastructure approach. Don't give up on making your point and insisting that partnership move forward. I would suggest, secondly, that you embrace the technology that makes a lot of people nervous, puts uncertainty in your world, and that can be decidedly a two-edged sword. Autonomous vehicles, electric, the technological platforms, they're not going to disappear. The key is for you to figure out how to use them in the advantage, be a part of those partnerships, have your own pilot projects, be able to move forward. We don't want to be in the situation that we found ourselves a couple years ago with drone technology, where we didn't quite know what to do with it, and the federal government used a sort of a clunky FAA approach. FAA is pretty good at landing 300,000-pound jets. Dealing with what are essentially flying cell phones, not so much. Especially when any kid could find one of them under the Christmas tree for less than one of those cell phones. We can't afford to let this leapfrog past us. And particularly as it relates to autonomous vehicle technology, that is going to be key to repurposing public spaces on a dramatic scale, improving effectiveness and safety. But you just have to insist on being part of the process, open and transparent, being assertive on your core principles with the industries, with Congress, and with state and local officials. And speaking of those autonomous vehicles and the electric vehicle revolution, that's going to bring about the collapse of our current revenue model. If we're going to be paying for transportation based on gallons of fuel consumed, parking revenues, and traffic fines, we're in trouble. So I suggest that all of us make a crusade out of accelerating the acceptance and the application of road user charges. It is our future, and it is coming much more rapidly than we think. Many of you are involved already at the transit level, having a seamless experience between transit modes. And that's exciting. But we need to make the payment for transportation of all modes seamless. And that sets the stage for what I think is the next important advance, and that is striking a grand bargain by focusing on making congestion pay for the cost. Congestion is the largest single item of our transportation agenda in terms of cost. It's congestion that is creating these massive problems. A road user charge is the easiest and quickest way to get congestion pricing, modest adjustments that will raise more revenue and will help shape behavior. And it's also the foundation for, as I say, a grand bargain. Because if we are focusing primarily on the cost of congestion, and we have a universal road user charge, It's not going to be that difficult for us to actually adjust the uniform cost down a little bit for rural and small town America, which isn't contributing that much to our congestion problem. And I think it might be the lubrication necessary to enact this broader change for a road user charge, make it more equitable, make it more popular, and make it happen faster. I still remember the discussions, the late lamented Max Baucus chairing the Senate Finance Committee, and he and his people weren't much excited about a road user charge because, gee, they drive big rigs long distances. It was hard to explain to the Montana team that if you drive long distances with big rigs, paying for it on a per gallon basis of fuel is actually a loser, but moving into this adjusted road user charge is something to break down that resistance. Having a grand bargain, and once we get the system in place, the adjustments that we can make to be able to manage transportation will be profound. Next, we need to expand your policy field. The things you are doing with housing, energy, dealing with problems of homelessness and economic development, along with transportation, are exciting. The panels that are here, some of the best and brightest and most innovative around the country, I can't say enough for. But we need to have panels on, shall we say, food and farm policy. This Congress is going to pass the most important environmental, health, infrastructure bill with the reauthorization of the Farm Bill. The opportunity to be able to deal with a change where we have a farm bill that doesn't subsidize a diet that makes Americans sick affects every one of your communities. Being able to adjust the policies in the Farm Bill that deal with water quality and water quantity and helping farmers and ranchers do the right thing affects your water supplies. Being able to protect farmland, help small and beginning farmers, providing for preserving the farms that surround most of our urban areas. Being able to promote economic development, value-added agriculture, organics, farmers' markets. I mean, these are things that are part of your urban landscape, and the Food and Farm Bill that largely goes under the radar for most environmental and do-gooder groups is a tremendous lost opportunity. It expires next year. I've had fun for a couple years talking to people in Oregon. What would a farm bill look like if it was just for the state of Oregon? I've got something on my website you might look at, because it would be interesting to think about what a farm bill would look like if it was just for Milwaukee or Columbus or Seattle. Most regions of the country are cheated under these policies, and it doesn't have to be that way. Or what about policies that deal with flooding and resilience? You may have noticed Hurricane Harvey and Irma. It's interesting watching the realization dawning, for example, even with some of my dear colleagues in Texas who resisted some of our earlier flood insurance reforms. 3 massive floods in Houston in 3 consecutive years, and the realization about how unchecked sprawl may contribute to the problem. When Houston finishes its next ring road, it will encompass an area, and that's what, 2 years out, 3 years out? It will encompass an area larger than Rhode Island. And it's at the expense of pulling out those prairie grasses that would act as a sponge rather than impervious surface that adds to the excitement of the rescue operations. These are opportunities that we need to think about building in to your agenda, no matter where you are. There are opportunities to shape federal policies on the national level and to get additional resources in the short term. Finally, a renewed commitment to Vision Zero. It's going mainstream, but we need to accelerate that progress. Lately, we've been getting some bad news in terms of what's happened in terms of safety, in terms of what's happening, some softening of the acceleration towards cycling. The understanding that speed kills, poor design kills, lack investment kill, not just people, it saps the life out of neighborhoods and streets. I think the time is ripe to really be insistent that this be woven into every politician's platform. It's kind of insidious, but I think effective in terms of getting people aligned in where you're going. And we need to make sure that in 2018 and 2020, we take advantage of an unparalleled outpouring of citizen action and involvement. I've not seen anything like it in my public service career. People are geared up, they're ready to go. Admittedly, there's been some problems and some backlash in some areas, being able to manage all of this enthusiasm and some of the things that are sort of a corollary from the last election. But people are making a difference. The Affordable Care Act is still in place because people have demanded it. They've acquainted themselves in terms of what difference it makes for people in nursing homes, people with severe disabilities, fighting local opioid crisis, keeping rural hospitals alive, and people insured. It is a testimony to people being involved. You may have heard about the Chuck and Nancy and Donald Unity Dinner, crafting great initiatives, fixing the budget issue. We've got budget stability for 3 months. Who knew? Who knew? And I sincerely believe that the foundation has been laid to take care of the tragic situation that has been thrust upon almost 800,000 dreamers. And that's because the people have been heard. Businesses, churches, local governments, private citizens, the dreamers themselves, and that matters. It may look like the political process is broken, and it is. It may look like we are dysfunctional, and we are. But you matter. Your voices make a difference. And I see it every day. Last and most important, it's what you're doing on the ground to support a return to federal policies that make it easier for you to do your job. There's no disputing the magnificent things that have happened here in Denver. And we're going to have a lot of fun next year in Pittsburgh, which is a fascinating case study. But we could return to Detroit, the number of communities that are being able to embrace and move forward with the principles that you advocate, doing the work with the community, expanding commitments to diverse participation and results is, I think, going to be a key to returning to a measure of stability and functionality, better outcomes in the election, and most important, bringing people together to solve problems, to make our communities more livable, to make our families safer, healthier, and more economically secure. And I look forward to being your partner in Washington, D.C. to help you achieve it. Thank you very much.